Hello, video social networking people. That's going to get old real fast, by the way. One in Water has made a video response to one of my videos in which he asked, are there any positives to religion? And specifically, he asked, does religion create generosity in people or foster generosity in people, or is it an effective force for family values, or, as some atheists contend, is it just a destructive force? And so I'm going to address that. I'm going to address it primarily by saying religion is an organizing principle based on dogmatism and fear. And so in the end, religion is really a tool for organizing people, and that's its most basic characteristics. I really don't think religion is in any way a force for good, but it's a little bit of a stretch to say it's a force for bad. It's a tool, right? Sort of like saying, are knives good or knives bad? Well, knives are a tool. You can use it to cut meat or cut things. But of course you can use them to stab people too. So religion is a tool. It carries with it, and really the complaint from us atheists is that it carries with it this dogmatism in which they pair up their concept of spirituality with fear. So the main religions all have a concept of hell, and really foster a fear of death. And the idea is that the way you take away this fear of death is they give you a way out, some spiritual way out. If you believe in that religion, then you'll somehow be saved from death by going to heaven or something like that. And of course they've increased the stakes by saying that death is not even the worst thing, and that you could go to hell. Anyway, so do I think that religion is a force for good? So let's take your points separately. The increase in generosity. I think that's both your points, the generosity and family value ones. These are concepts in which people are think about them. It's a vacuous concept in that you're meant to think those things without having a single concrete thing to back them up, because there isn't a concrete thing to back them up. So increases in generosity, for example, that's just utter nonsense. I mean, congregation members are I think there's a general recommendation that you give about 10% of your income to the church. And so this fuels this deceptive idea that, since they don't demand the 10%, it's a kind of recommended social practice. So, that means everybody who gives that 10% is considered by default to have given it, and therefore must in some sense be considered generous. But it's just circular, right? I mean, that's no different from, for example, the social convention of tipping people. Tipping your waitress or a cab driver. And to be totally honest, I bumped that up not to my income level, but I bumped that up to 15% on the fare usually, or the price of the meal or whatever. So it's just social convention isn't the actual substitute for generosity. Isn't generosity. Generosity is giving to people who really need. And so for example, when there's those tsunami victims, when there was that tsunami over in India, whatever, a few years ago, of course, the vast majority of people, for example, in America are Christians. So when they all wanted to give money, a convenient way for them to do so was through their church. And of course, it's very convenient for the church because they can take credit for it, right? This church gave so and so amount of money. Well, it's the congregation who's giving them. Anyways, it's just it's obviously the Red Cross exists, and the Red Cross is a non-religious institution, and atheists gave money to the tsunami victims just the same, just happened to go through the Red Cross. So should atheists get to take credit for all the Red Cross donations? Obviously that isn't the case either, because some religions I mean, some religious people actually gave money through the Red Cross rather than their church, because churches are somewhat corrupt, in case you're wondering. Um, so, I mean, and I'm serious about this. I don't think you could find a single hard number anywhere that suggests that religious people are more generous. If you could, and this is very serious, I'm not just saying these things, if you could, the religious people, the churches, would bandy about those figures forever. We would be hearing no end of such statistics. But it simply isn't the case. You never hear about such numbers. You don't hear about them because those numbers don't exist. Because it's nonsense. I really just don't think religion makes people more generous. It's just it's an idea somebody's planted in people's heads. I just think it's blatantly untrue. Then you say the focus on family values. Okay, well, in the United States, family values is a highly charged political term, and it has the same kind of vacuous meaning as generosity in religion. It's, you know, the divorce rates amongst atheists are around 21%, and amongst believers is around 25%. Okay, so, I mean, I don't know. And, religious people are just silly. They don't have any concept of family planning, like contraceptions or Planned Parenthood or anything like that. They just don't. They have completely backward notions of how that should work, and this inevitably causes negative pressure on families. And here's another, it's a very narrow point, but just if you want to make something really concrete that is undeniable, obviously the churches in the United States have a massively anti-gay position. It's pretty much across the board. Now, amongst gay people, gay male couples typically don't have any interest in starting a family. I mean, based on having children, for example. However, gay lesbian couples, and this is anecdotal because I am so ignorant about the gay culture, but from what I understand, and this is second-hand or third-hand information, is that gay lesbian couples do not, just because they're lesbian, they don't lose their maternal instincts, and so typically gay lesbians actually do want to create families. And that means having children, whether it's through adoption or artificial insemination or having a friend, whatever, to help them out. Lesbians actually would like to form families, and you can argue whether you think they're good families or not, but they're families. You can't deny that. But of course, the religion would very much like to put an end to that. So, you think that there are positive on family values, or maybe you think that family values means the promotion of a particular kind of family. That's fine, but then that's not a positive thing, right? You can say that as a positive thing, but that's only if you're a priori accepting the religious position. You know what I'm saying? So is it a force for good? Is a force for good by their definition of good, which is nonsense, right? It's not compatible with my definition of good. I don't have a problem with lesbians forming families. Okay, that's simple. Then finally you ask, or is religion a destructive force? Well, religion in its own dogmas does not contain doctrines that say, thou shalt be evil and let's go do these things which are evil. They're really kind of side effect things. As I said, religion more than anything is an organizing principle, that carries within it dogmatism and fear. But the one thing that you cannot deny about religion is that they have just an amazing amount of power. They have leverage. They can leverage such a large number of people. So this is a very important point, that religion does have power. Because how could an institution with so much power claim to do any good, and yet have nothing to show for it. Literally, there's no measurable thing, no measurable good that religion has ever done. You know, there are only a handful of cases, and really they're hard to find, and it's bizarre in this case. The only ones that can come to mind for me are Martin Luther King and Bishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. These are literally the only, I'm racking my brain as it's the only thing I can think of as something you can consider objectively good. So Martin Luther King, obviously himself a reverend, he was able to leverage the power of his own church to organize people to do the marches and so on, and he's really been a force for, good civil rights and stuff like that in the United States. And Bishop Desmond Tutu had a similar positive effect in South Africa. Having to do with the ending of apartheid and just. But these are two very somewhat minor cases. Like, they don't have global effect. They're somewhat, they have effects locally in their own countries, and for the whole history of religion, and this is all I can find, these two things, religion has had opportunities to flex its muscles. And really, let's just take the most blatantly example. During World War II, the spread of fascism in Europe, religion never took a position against Hitler or Mussolini. They wiped their hands of it clean. How could such a powerful institution claim to be any force for good at all? When handed an opportunity to them on a silver platter to do something good, they could have taken a stand against fascism, or done anything to try and help people, help the Jews maybe, anything. They did nothing. Quite literally, follow this reasoning. If religion were a force for good, knowing that it is just such an incredible power, how is it possible that they could be a force for good and have nothing measurable, objectively measurable, to show for it? When you ask a religious person who's steeped in belief, of course, they'll say, oh, religion's done all this good because it's brought Jesus into my heart. It's circular. It's circular. They create the need for Jesus in your heart by creating this fear of hell in the first place. Then they do the good of, oh, well, now here's your escape from this fear that we've instilled in you. That doesn't count as good. Okay? Now, you may think I'm just being dogmatic, or it's dogmatic. Well, you think I'm just, attacking religion baselessly because I'm setting this too high of a bar. Well, let me give you an example of what I consider good. Okay, this is a list of things that have nothing to do with religion, but which I consider to be good. Hygiene and medicine, that's 1. 2. Social security and welfare, that's a little debatable, but in the end it's raised the average standard of living quite a bit, so I'm just going to, from my political point of view, it's definitely a force for good. 3. Science and technology, just in general. Light bulbs. Okay, let's not be too controversial about that. And then 4, democracy. These are all incredible forces for good. And democracy is also a little controversial, but whatever. It's better than not having it, for example. So these are 4 incredible things that have really pushed society forward in just amazing ways, right? They're objective. Everyone can agree that these have had, or at least science and technology, hygiene and medicine, that one, those 2 are undeniable. You have to be a retard not to think those are forces for good. Okay? Incredible progress, right? And these are not things that were created by. So this is the bar I'm setting. Religion has that kind of power. So simply ask, what good has religion done that is comparable to any of these things that I've listed? As that, just comparing that as a scale. Okay? All right, so has religion done anything good? You can't possibly think that. It's just the most retarded, ridiculous thing. Now, they have all this leverage, so what the hell? What the hell does religion decide to do with this power? In the last, and I'm sorry for demonizing Bush, but I don't know any better. The example is just too good. During the Bush administration, basically, in these last 7 years under his presidency, clearly the religion has had the ear of our president. They have been able to really, they have real leverage, and so with all that leverage, what do they choose to do? They choose to push their agenda on abortion, which, by the way, is a minority position in the United States, about 35% support. A ban on stem cells. They haven't quite got it, but just the negative actions from our administration against stem cells. Just a completely anti-medicine point of view. It doesn't make any sense. Euthanasia. They made a big deal out of Terri Schiavo. They wanted to reanimate her from the dead somehow. And pushing intelligent design in our schools. Promoting abstinence only. And especially in, foreign aid given to, education to foreigners like in Africa, right? The Americans are giving aid to charities in Africa which promote abstinence only, which of course is not a solution to AIDS, and is essentially killing. It's actually a form of genocide, right? And of course, religion is backing all of these things. This is your force for good. This is your force for good. Utter nonsense. The idea that religion is a force for good. Now, still not convinced? Consider this. The war in Iraq. The American people are slowly but surely coming to the idea that maybe that was a bad idea. Retards. The religious in the United States easily could have stopped this war before it started. They have the votes. The threat of the 2004 election would have been easily enough. They could have just said, we don't think that this, the Bush, Ted Haggard could have just went to Bush and said, we don't think this war is good for, religion or for, for Christianity in America one way or another, and we won't be able to support you on this. There's your force for good right there. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about the 650,000 dead Iraqis. They care about reanimating Terri Schiavo from her vegetative state. There's your force for good right there. To be later.